Hey, She Slayers, and welcome to another episode of She Slays Today podcast. I am your host, Dr. Lauren Brunslick. And today we have on another Chiro, Dr. Gena Bofshever Alon. I don't know. Alon. How would you guys pronounce that? I just knew her as Bofshever. Uh, so she's going to be on because I was talking to my accountability group a couple weeks ago, and somebody mentioned, "Oh yeah, well, Dr. Jenna set herself up for a 4-month maternity leave." And I was like, "Wait, what? How did the girlfriend get a 4-month maternity leave?" So I know her, she's awesome, but I wanted to have her on so, we could talk because maternity leave, it's kind of a thing. Like it's like not a thing actually is I guess it would be more the accurate way of saying it. This is a big issue within chiropractic, on lots of levels. So, like, one, we have, I don't know if you've heard, this is kind of like one of my soapboxes, but like 40 to 50% of chiros are not practicing 5 years after graduation. And like, I love when chiros marry chiros. That's awesome for you. Like, your debt to income ratio is an issue. No, my biggest issue isn't the debt. It's the like what ends up happening historically. Oh, there have been so many times that I have been talking to a female chiro or a male chiro, and I'm like, "Oh, your wife is also a chiropractor. Fantastic. So, what does she do in the practice?" And y'all know, you know what she does. She runs the damn front desk and raises the kids. And I was just talking to another chiro friend, a female, and we were talking about speakers, because there's a super secret thing coming up that I can't tell you about yet. But anyways, and she was saying, well, we were talking about a speaker, and she's like, "Oh, he's great. My only issue is he's a huge promoter of men stepping up and taking care of their wives so that their wives can stay home with the kids." And I'm just like, "Oh man, I don't know." Like, I do think, because I am a huge Jordan Peterson fan, so don't get me wrong. I love the message of, like, men step up and be men. Um, I love that. But I also think that it just creates issues, right? Like, the kids thing, it's not a thing that we have solved as chiropractors, especially as chiropractors who ideally, yeah, we don't want our kids. Well, I shouldn't speak for everybody. Like, I feel like the chiropractic oath that we didn't know we were taking was like, and then you should breastfeed your children for 2 years, and they should never, like, and you should homeschool them. And, like, I'm not for or against or anything. I just go like, well, that creates issues. One of the reels that I has been like going around in my head was like, Chiro math is paying $250,000 for a degree just to realize you want to stay home and raise your children. Like, awesome. Awesome. Um, so, Dr. Jenna is not staying home, but she did set herself up with a 4-month maternity leave, which is rare. Both of my maternity leaves, I didn't have any associates at this point. And she is going to talk about, maybe what you can do if you're not at a point of getting an associate. That is something that I think maternity leave pushes a lot of female chiropractors. Like, oh gosh, there's so many soapboxes here. The number of female chiros that I have talked to that have shitty profitability, no offense to them, no offense. There's a lot of men also. But the reason was because they brought on an associate because that seemed like the easiest thing for their maternity leave. I don't love it, guys. I do not love hiring a $70,000 a year employee because you need 3 months of coverage. Like, I don't like it. And so a lot of female chiros really get into the situation where they are pregnant and they feel like they need to quit grow so they can. And if that's where you're at, that's awesome. If you've grown to that point where you're like, no, we definitely need an associate. And it happens to be. But the problem is if you're bringing on an associate because you need an associate, they can't necessarily cover like 2 docs worth of stuff. They're brand new. Like, if you're covering 300 people a week and you need an associate for that, like, bringing on someone to cover, I don't know. I don't know. It's messy. Like the whole point of this intro is like we need to talk about this more and more. It's not solved. Just a little more background too, since I talked with Dr. Jenna, is so up until this point, we haven't had any of our associates give birth. I was the only one who gave birth, and I didn't have any associates. And I just did the shortest maternity leave I could do because we really had poor coverage options. And our clinic tanked 40 to 50% both. Even though the second time I thought like I learned all my mistakes from the first one, and like this time it's not going to happen, still happened. And but so we started looking into short-term disability because I knew ethically. So our current associate has been with us for like 7 years. And I am all about like part of my core what I'm doing here with She Slays. Like if you haven't picked this up yet, is like I want our profession to be more sustainable. That does mean more profitable Kairos. I actually had somebody DM me after my most recent reel, like, I feel like you're really leaning into the wealth stuff lately. And it was like a close friend. So like they didn't mean it, but they were just like, what's, and I was like, well, because like we have a lot of broke chiropractors. Like, this isn't about like creating rich chiropractors. If you see the word wealth and think like I'm trying to get you rich and that makes you feel icky, well, you have a mental mindset issue. But um no, like wealth is about sustainability. Like when it is easier to quit chiropractic and make twice as much selling insurance, we have an issue. Like, so we have issues within chiropractic and I love talking about them. And maternity leave and what we do, because now 50% of the profession is female, supposedly. This is an issue. We have to figure things like this out. And so we looked into AFLAC recently and getting short term disability for our associate. Just so you know, they will not cover 100%. They'll cover up to like 60% or something like that. And it needs to be 10 months before the birth. But like as an employer who wants to provide a paid maternity leave, like that was important to me. Like I wanted to go, how can I solve this for associates? I want someone when they're going, should I own my own clinic or should I become an associate? I want them to go, if I become an associate, there are benefits, there are PTO, there's maternity leave. And so I was like, okay, well, how do I do that as a clinic owner? And so far, besides just like losing all of that money and lack of like profit during that time where the associate is out, AFLAC or other short-term disability seems like the best route. So, if you're an owner and you're like wanting to talk about like your maternity leave or your associates, I do recommend doing that. But yeah, so what else? Do I have anything else for you? Oh yeah, her. Do you want to hear about her? So, Dr. Jenna is a leading South Florida chiropractor, owner of her own multi doctor practice, and dedicated health advocate who has influenced the industry for over 15 years. Dr. Jenna has a focus on and passion for perinatal care, pediatrics, and family wellness, as well as mentoring other chiropractic professionals. She has a vivacious spirit coupled with a staunch commitment to the well being of her clients and has made her a standout force in the community, a leader in her field, and sought after professional for education and empowerment. Currently, Dr. Jenner resides in South Florida with her husband and 3 sons. Um, I love when people are like, currently she resides. Does that mean you're like moving? Like, I don't know. I've just never said. I usually in my bio, it's like, she is stuck and being held captive up in Northwest Wisconsin with her loving husband and children. Send help. Just kidding. Just kidding. She's only held captive January 1st through June 1st. Otherwise, she loves living in Northwest Wisconsin. I do. That is the truth, just in case you're wondering. 6 months a year, I love living here, but the other. Okay, so let's take a breather and connect with each other the best that we can. So, whether you are walking the dog, loading the dishwasher, driving, I encourage you just to like feel yourself connect in this moment with yourself. Like, what is your heart doing? What is your jaw doing? Like, where are your points of grounding on this earth? Are you sitting? Are you standing? And just take a nice breath in and be present in this moment. If you have the joy of right now being exposed to sunlight or air, just like absorb those electrons. Do you know that we get that's how we get electrons? Two-thirds of our electrons for the electron transport chain for the mitochondria, that is the powerhouse of the cell. Two-thirds are supposed to come from things like water and wind and grass. You can even get some from cement, apparently, and sunshine. And so, just like if you're in this moment, just soak it in and picture little electrons coming into you and going through the little squiggly electron transport chain and just giving you energy and fuel for your cells. And be grateful for this moment that we can share together. In your name we pray. I don't know. Okay, without further ado, here is my conversation on the 4-month maternity leave that Dr. Gena Bofshever Alon gave herself. Enjoy. Okay, so where are you at in this post baby situation? How many babies have you
So
had? 3?
I have 3. I have a 4-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and a 6-month-old tomorrow.
Okay. So I have this question for parents who have more than 2. What made you do it?
So I always thought
Why did
that
you do that?
because we're crazy. No, I always thought that I'd have 2. And then the second my second son was born and he was on my chest, I looked down at him and I knew I wanted to have another. I
Oh.
never thought I would feel that way. And my husband always wanted a lot of kids, and I was like, "I don't know." So I knew for certain that I wanted a 3rd.
Mm. See, so I remember we weren't going to make any decisions. Like we were undecided. And we weren't going to make any decisions until our youngest was like closer to 2. And so a lot of the thought process, and this sounds so selfish because I waffle between it because like sometimes I do wish because like the idea of having 3 or 4 kids and like all my head goes to is like Christmases in the future where they like all come back and you've just got this big family. Like that is really cool.
But that's because 'cause
But
they're adults and you're done doing the work.
right. Yes. But where I became like starting to freak out is like, well, they outnumber us.
Yeah,
And then like really life, a moving family through life is really designed for a family of 4. Like
true.
traveling, like hotel rooms
Cars.
and yeah. And so I know but that was one of the biggest things is I was like, would I rather do more traveling with less children or more children and like less traveling? And maybe if I lived where you lived by a beach. So
There's
it's like
always on
that's
vacation.
another thing. You're like, "Oh, we don't really travel that much." Yeah, because you live where people vacation. So
Yeah.
it doesn't count. Um, no,
So you
also
how old are your kids?
9 and 12.
Okay, so they're at the
Like
age you can
we are
travel.
we've been traveling since they were tiny. We've been doing all inclusive since our youngest was like 2. No, they're at like a creepy age that of independence
Okay.
that it's so easy. So like it's like creepily easy. Just like you don't have to shower them. Like you don't have
So
to get them dressed. They
does
make
that
their
mean
own
you're ready to have another?
No, no, because now we're too close to the finish line.
Yeah,
Now if we wouldn't have like snip snip made it official when our youngest was 2, I do think I would have had another one when our youngest was 4. I
yeah,
think I would have like been like, okay, yeah. But now now we're like in the 9-year planning of like,
yeah.
okay, we're gonna be empty nesters. What does that mean for my career, our careers? Like, I
Totally
mean,
different ballgame.
I've got all these hobbies I'm planning on starting, like looking at real estate licenses,
Mhm.
taxidermy classes. I've
Taxidermy?
Oh, yes. Okay, so I do you know the podcast Ologies? By the way, this is all going on the podcast. This is
Okay,
welcome to the podcast, Jenna.
taxidermy.
Uh, so have you heard of the podcast Ologies?
No.
Okay. So it's a really nice our kids listen to podcasts. And so like family road trips or things like that where we're in the car, it's one of the podcasts that we'll listen to together as a
Okay,
family. And so ologies is they just like talk to an expert on something. So ology is like the study of.
sure.
And so I forget what the name for taxidermy is, but like they had like a taxidermy specialist on and I was hooked. Do you know how cool the art of taxidermy is?
I
Like,
actually don't. I do not.
it's so cool, and there's, like it's very hard. There's not, like, schooling on it. You have to, like, do an apprenticeship, basically.
Oh,
So, I need to find, like, some guy named Chad who is but, like, there's, like, people taxiderming deer all over the place around
but
here.
where
Like,
yeah, where you live, that's
where
more
I
common.
live.
Yeah.
But you got, like, taxidermy fish and stuff down there, I bet.
We
I'll have
have well, the Panthers are here. We have the Florida Panthers, which I've never seen one, but there's alligators, like, there's wildlife here.
oh my god, taxiderming dermying? You're not supposed to say stuffing. I did know that they don't like that term. Like, that is kind of offensive.
Well,
It's
that's like
mounting.
manipulation or cracking to a chiropractor.
Okay, do you get I literally had this conversation we have an intern right now,
Okay.
and, she's a teen 9. So, like which is crazy that 1/5 of so she's from Northwestern, so T9 and T10, so 1/5 of her entire schooling is on me,
Oh
like,
my
on my
god.
office, and I'm like,
Don't mess it up.
"Oh, shit. Okay,
Oh, wait,
I
we
got
can
this."
curse on this
Oh, yeah.
podcast?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, because I was gonna say fuck, and
Yeah,
I was
you can do that.
okay, cool.
I when I do your intro, I'll, like, be like, "Oh, trigger warning." Where was I going with that? Oh, so the crack and the manipulation. So, like, yesterday alone, I had multiple patients just be like, like, "I am so ready for a good crack," or what.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I said, like, I feel bad for chiropractors that get their undies in a bundle when their patients don't refer to adjustments the right way.
Yeah.
Because there are definitely chiros that get like, I do not crack the spine. And I'm like, okay, we all know. Like,
So we joke around with it. We'll joke like crack is whack, and then we all laugh.
yeah,
It doesn't bother me. I just
no,
care that they're showing up. So however they wanna refer to it, like, they obviously see the value, so
yeah.
that part to me doesn't really drive me crazy.
Yeah, the only time I would correct it is if somebody is using it in a fearful way, like a new patient is like, "I'm
Sure.
just really scared about you cracking my back." And then I'll go, "Well, hey, let's
We're
talk
not
about that."
cracking anything.
We're actually not. But that's the only time. Like if
Yeah.
somebody's like there and they're like, "I'm excited for this," like don't rain on their parade. Like
Yeah.
nobody wants like, "Okay, Mr. Overachiever table talk." Like get out of here.
So there I remember when I was in school in Atlanta, there was a guy in, like, somewhere downtown that used to advertise best crack in town, which is
Oh,
hilarious, but he clearly did not have a family practice because like, that
oh
wouldn't go
my
over so
god.
well with kids, but,
I
it's
aspire
funny.
to be able to for, like, the cynical, like, part that all of you know I am, I, like, just aspire to be able to actually run a business that way. I would love to how, like, you get asked to sponsor little, like, kids sports teams?
Yeah.
I have wanted to write a big check just to insist they're named the Crack Addicts.
Well, there's restaurants that you can go to where they treat you like shit, like, you
Oh, yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah.
pay. So there's something to that.
Oh, no, I couldn't do that, though. Like, that is actually, what is that, like, Bob's Last Resort or
I've
Dick's?
never gone to
Dick's.
it.
I think it's like Dick's or something. No, 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 that is not for me. I don't like people being mean to me. I am actually that is my worst nightmare because I part of being an Enneagram 3 is, like there's, like, jokes that one of the things we really love is, like, going through security, and we, like, think that TSA is gonna be like, "Great job." Like, or, like, anytime you order something and the waiter is like, "Oh, you picked the
That's
best
the
thing on
right
the menu,"
choice.
and you're like,
Yeah.
gold star for me." So,
So I don't care that I get the gold star. I care that I ordered the best thing on the menu because I
'cause you're a
like the food.
foodie.
Yeah.
Are you an Enneagram 3 though?
When I've taken this test or done the things to find out, and I just like don't remember what Enneagram I am. So you have to tell me by the end of this talk because there's
I
people that are like,
don't.
I can tell what you are by
I've
looking and talking
I've
at you.
never diagnosed someone ever in my life. Because that's like
I
a big
don't know.
no-no.
I've
You're
been
not supposed
diagnosed. I
to
don't know.
diagnose people, but I do it all the time. Yeah, and I know what's difficult about you, I'm actually leaning more towards, like, the 7 eights, like 7
Okay.
wing 8, 8 wing 7, but I don't we'll see, we'll see. Okay, so we got off track. Back to
Okay.
the alligators.
Well, I do have a question. How old were you when you started having kids?
25.
So I think that's also a big difference too, right? Because I get why people have kids in their 20s because you have way more energy than I do. I'm 42.
Mhm.
And my
Oh.
husband's yeah, and my husband's older than me. So it's like when you're in your 20s, you got all this energy and probably not so much money.
Mhm.
And when you're in your 40s, you have I mean, I still have a fair amount of energy, but you definitely like it's harder to pull an all-nighter at this age, but you're in a
I can't
different
imagine.
financial position. So there's that piece. I
So do you
think
have
that
an
you
au
have to
pair?
factor we don't. My husband's actually a stay-at-home dad right now.
Okay. So he's staying
So
up, but you still
yeah.
have to
Well,
milk
no,
it.
I stay up because I'm breastfeeding.
Right.
So, but it's like the job at home is much harder. And I know we're going to get into practice and all of that, but the job of taking care of the kids and all that comes along with that is way, way, way harder than my job at the office. Managing people, getting in patients, like marketing, all the things, like raising a family is way more challenging. Cause like you joke, at least at work, like if you give an order, you ask something, like someone's gonna do it, or they'll
Right.
logically talk you through why they won't. At home, if you tell that to a toddler, they do not give a fuck. They're
Right.
gonna lose their shit and they're gonna start screaming, and then the baby's gonna start screaming, and there's sensory overload, and then you start screaming, and it's just no more gentle parenting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's like the difference between adjusting adults and adjusting kids, where it's like, I've never have I ever had a 35-year-old woman walk to my office and throw a tantrum in the corner saying she doesn't want to get adjusted today. It's never happened.
Well,
Like,
you'd probably kick her out if it did.
right. If it
Just
did.
wouldn't be the right fit.
Ma'am, that's not the kind of crack we give here.
Wrong
You're in
office.
the wrong obvious. Okay, so talk to me about your like you just somebody else was bragging to me. Michelle Brown was actually
Yeah, I love her.
bragging to
She's
me
awesome.
that you had a 4-month maternity leave
Yeah, so
with this one.
I've had three maternity leaves. My first 2 I took 3 months for, and this last one I took 4 months.
So that is kind of like the golden egg in chiropractic. Like, how did you and were you set up with associates beforehand with all three of them? Like, how did you make
Yes.
that happen? Okay.
So with all 3, yes, and all 3 scenarios were very different. I can kind of break them down a bit. And I wanna sidestep and say that, it's really interesting. If you decide to take a sabbatical or a hiatus, I don't just mean go on a 2-week vacation. Like, if someone wanted to step out of practice for 3 to 4 months, it would be frowned upon.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
patients would have a hard time with it. I think that there would probably be resentment by team and other people
Must
that
be
work with you.
nice.
No, like we
Yeah.
I hear shit like that all the time, right? And I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? I've busted my ass for so many years to set things up to this point that." And I would feel guilty about it too. Like I would like feel so bad missing because, that was my first baby. Like this practice, I'm in practice over 15 years, started out as an associate for the first 3 years and then moved down to Florida and opened as I was an independent contractor renting space out of someone else's office and then went ahead, took out the loan and did the full build out and at that point started bringing on associates and mentoring other people. So like i've I've worked really hard to get to this point and still I would sometimes feel bad about it. There's always this like weird feeling before I'd step out to go on a leave of like, okay, I can't leave, is it going to be okay, what's going to happen, especially the first time. And then I would get into this mom mode and I would tell my husband, like, "I don't know if I can go back." And he's like, "You love what you do. Like, what are you talking about?" I'm like, "I don't know, because I would remove myself so much from it. It's kinda like think about the night before your first day of school and you get that, like, anxiousness of, like, how's it gonna go?
Mhm.
Nervous. Like, it's this really weird feeling where it was my first baby that I created all of it. I put those systems into place. I trained everybody, and I was, like, nervous and afraid to go back. I'm like, "I don't remember things, and I'm this different person." And then, you get back in and it's like riding a bike. It's okay, let's pick right up where we left off. But no, I had to be set up for that. And I think that if you're in practice, like if I was in practice and I didn't have any associates, what I would do is I would bring in a coverage doctor, which is
Mhm.
what I would do for vacation. That's what I did when I would go away before I had any babies. So I even have coverage in the office now, and she's been with us over 10 years. So our patients know her, like she's in there regularly with us. And it creates for more freedom for us.
So you just have a regular coverage doc that you has been working with you for 10 years?
Yeah, off and on for 10 years. So like sometimes
Wow.
we go away to conferences, right? I don't want to, I'm open on Saturday. I know a lot of people like poo poo that, but I've always been open on Saturday. in the 2 hours we're open, we'll see between 40 and 60 people. So it doesn't make
Mhm.
sense to not be open for the convenience for other people. So like, let's say we're away at a conference, instead of closing the office, we bring in a coverage doc. So maybe we're not doing exams and reports those days, but we have a solid set of hands caring for our patients so that again there's that freedom, like we can go and train for things, we can go and do things, and we're not like handcuffed or stuck to, or like the business doesn't operate, or someone that you're telling they need to be there 3 times a week and you're like, well, sorry, I'm on vacation, you're no longer important. Like that didn't work for me either. So my first maternity leave, I had hired an associate with, there was 90 days, there's about 3 months of training, so it was the first time
Okay.
I'm going out to do that. My previous
And were
associate.
you at a point where, because I know a lot of docs maybe wouldn't bring on an associate not yet, but because they're going, like, to have a baby
Sure.
in a maternity leave, they're like, like, maybe they're seeing 160 and they
No,
really wanted to get to, like, 250 before, but, like, I can make it work." So, like, was this like a, "Sure, since I'm having a baby, I'll bring on an associate?"
no, I had had associates already for quite a few years before that. I always had one
Okay.
associate working with me, and my associate that I had, she left to go work. She moved away closer to her family, so there was an open position, and someone applied. We interviewed, and I thought it would be a good fit. And the truth is that there's a couple pieces to this. Like one, I don't think 3 months is enough time training to like
Okay.
fully remove yourself out. At least in my experience, that's all I can speak of. But to fully remove myself the way that I did at 3 months, I feel like it needs to be a minimum of 6 months, maybe even a year.
Really?
If you want to have growth while you're out and
Yeah.
you want everything to operate,
Growth versus,
yeah.
like, yeah, I think there's different goals, like, we'll get to my completely different maternity leaves and coverage experiences, but, like, my goals were, like, just, like, literally don't let the place start on fire and, like, answer the phone if somebody comes.
So like the first one was really kind of like a shit show because also my son was born April 2020. And you remember what went down then, like the world shut down. Now Florida
Jeez.
was essential, so we stayed open, but it was
But
wild.
that
It was
was your
wild.
maternity leave?
That was my maternity leave. It was really, the whole thing was crazy, and, like, so I'm trying to manage all this stuff while, like, everyone's freaking out, and I'm getting on calls with, like, everybody, like, not only the team in the office, with my attorney, with my coaches, and, like, how do we navigate this? And, like, we could have to close any day, and, like,
Yeah.
it was really wild in the beginning. I mean, if anybody who was in practice through that knows what I'm
Oh,
talking about.
it was I Wisconsin was similar. We were essential, stayed open the whole time. But I was monitoring like the state releases like multiple times a day because things were changing
Sure.
by the hour of like it was nuts.
No, and it was scary, like, even I remember, like, so the associate we had at the time, she was saying to me that she was, like, scared to go into work, so I had to
Mhm.
call my coverage doc, and I was like, "Listen, I have someone that's not gonna, like, be there, like, in the capacity that I would need, because if I was there, I would show up." But it was this weird time where I'm like, "I'm not sacrificing my maternity leave, I don't care what's happening in the world, like, I don't get this time." So I was saying earlier is that, like, people would always look like frown upon it if you were to take a sabbatical or you just wanted like a mental health break for 3 months. But when you have a baby, people are very forgiving about it. And so I took 3 months that first time. And so I remember calling my coverage doc to be like, hey, if I need you to come in, can you be there? She's like, I'll be there. And so, and the doc ended up working it. Like I remember they wanted to work some of the hours, but I'm like, if you're there at all, you're still being exposed. So either we're like, you're working or you're not. Like
Right.
we have to like figure this out. And if you're going to do it, like be all in. And if not, then I have a backup. Like, but we need to have a set game plan so that like we know what's going on as much as we can every day.
Mhm.
So that first one, we had about 90 days of training. My opinion, that was not enough. I don't mean just enough to adjust. I'm talking about running everything in the practice, like being the lead doc. That's like
Yeah.
your new patient exams, all your report of findings, making sure that the patients are well cared for and people are overseeing everything. Like there's a lot that goes into it. I don't just mean laying hands on people.
Right.
So I knew that that person wasn't the right fit. So when I came back, I did let them go. I think they hate me. They blocked me on like all social media. It's the only person that ever was a part of my team as a doctor or as an intern who like I'm sure forever hates me. And it is what it is. You know, I'm forever grateful for them because they allowed me to have that time with my family, but ultimately it wasn't the right fit. So that was the first one. So my plan when I came back from maternity leave the first time was to come back part-time, not full-time. And so, I was breastfeeding, I'm like navigating being a new mom. And I'm like, okay, I have this person on my team. And then, like, literally the day I came back, I had to let them go. And then I went from not working at all to working like 200%. And yeah, that was hard, like, and figuring out breastfeeding and pumping and how do you take breaks and how do you keep it all up, but once my energy was back, the practice grew, like, by a huge percentage, and I was
Mhm.
like, "Okay," and, I remember a past coach I had, he shared, he's like, "Babies bring luck, they bring good luck," and it was literally like I came back a different person, I was like, "Okay, I'm focused, let's do this," even though I wasn't sleeping, it was, like, crazy, somehow, like, you dig deep down, moms are incredible, and you find this other energy because you've gotta care for your first baby, and, my family's livelihood depended on it, and the
Yeah.
people that worked for us, their livelihood depended on it. So that was the first one. Then, after that, I actually brought an intern on, which that's my favorite. My favorite is to bring on interns, number 1, to mentor them, but really for hiring and bringing on associates, I really think it's the best way to see someone's work ethic and if they're the right fit. Because
Right.
there's no way to know when someone's interviewing how they're
No.
actually gonna be. So
No.
so, like,
Not
you
at all.
invest all this stuff to, like, find, okay, they're great, and then they get in there and maybe they're not so great, and then it's like, "Ah, what do we do?" You
Yeah,
know?
because 'cause you've just, like, pumped, like yes, you've just announced to everyone, "This is our new doctor." Like, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and not only that, like, at that point, like, there's just so much that is, at that point, gone into getting them set up for this, right? You're taking care of malpractice and all this other stuff that's like, ooh, so I also love students. I feel like they're really excited. They bring a lot of new energy and excitement to the table. So I had an intern and then I had someone reach out to me where they wanted to do their internship with me and they wanted to do it was 2 quarters and it was 6 months. So no one at the time knew that I was pregnant with my second son. And I was like, well, hey, in full confidentiality, you can't ever repeat this to anyone. And I was like, I'm pregnant. And I'm like, what are the dates you want? She was like, she wanted to do October through March. And I was like, well, I'm due Christmas. So here's the choices. I was like, you can come here, double up on your peak, graduate early. And if you're awesome, you have a job. And if you suck, I can't offer you that. What do you want to do? And she was moving here from Wisconsin. And she was like, well, let me think on that. And I was like, okay. And then she called me back and she was like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to double peak. I'm going to graduate early. And I was like, cool. If you're awesome, you got a job. And yeah, brought her on. She was awesome. But again, we only had 3 months of training. So
Mhm.
now I'm stepping out on my maternity leave. So what I did for that
And not
second,
just 3 months to a doc, 3 months
like
to
a
a
student,
student.
yeah. So there's a lot, right? So what I did for the second maternity leave is a friend of mine had over 30 years experience practicing up north, like super heavy in the philosophy of chiropractic too, a solid adjuster. So I was like, hey, you want to come down to Florida
You
and
know what?
like
I'm just
working on
basically, you've stolen, like, 2 people from Wisconsin now. Like, this is goddamn bitches stealing docs. You know how
well,
hard
she
it is to
wasn't from
find
Wisconsin,
doctors?
that one. She was
Yeah.
from the Northeast. So I was like, "Hey, you wanna come down and just adjust?" Like, they weren't trained in exams, anything like that, but, like, literally be a solid set of hands so that Dr. Jordan can do her thing and kinda run the practice. And so my second maternity leave was way different financially than the first one, but the second one, I took 3 months for, and basically, like, we were there was no we weren't making money. It was just like we were breaking even. And then I
Mhm,
think the last month before I came back, we actually were in the negative,
mhm.
not off by a lot, but I was like, okay, I still wasn't going to sacrifice that time. Like that was my time to bond with my baby. And I was like, I only get this time before I go back. And so then I came back and then we really had the opportunity to really train. I think it takes an associate minimum, I said this earlier, minimum of 6 months, at least a solid year. I think it takes really anybody in their role in an office a solid year to know everything well enough where where they've got it. Like you could step away and they really know what's going on. Because if someone doesn't have it by 6 months in, they're not ever getting it and they're just not the right fit or they're in the wrong position in the office. So when I came back, I ended up getting pregnant, like I think 11 months or 12 months after. So all my kids are 21 and 22 months apart. Like my babies are very close in age. So I remember I told Dr. Jordan, I was like, hey, so I'm pregnant. And she was like, okay, we're gonna make it work. I was actually nervous to tell her, you know? But what we set up for this pregnancy, for this maternity leave was okay, we're gonna have everything in place. So office manager at the time had been with us over a year. Dr. Jordan had been with us for a year and a half. Like we were in a completely different place to do that. And so this one I took 4 months and I actually ended up taking off earlier so that I could have some time to just fucking chill because
Mhm.
now I've gone through, at that point, it was like 2 to 3 years of not sleeping, right? Pregnant and or breastfeeding. And I'm such a like go, 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 go person and like high tension that like I felt like I needed to try to like give myself some time to be home without any other children and have time to prep and relax. And I didn't do that. My first birth, I remember telling my team, I was like, here's the game plan. Kelly, who's my CA, been with me over 6 years. I was like, Kelly, when I go into labor at the office, I was like, you're gonna drive my car to the hospital. I birthed in the hospital, okay? You're gonna drive my car to the hospital and then you'll Uber back and we'll call Bobby and you'll let him know I'm in labor. I was like, I'm going till the end. Like it was just, I don't know why. I just assumed I'd be like delivering in my office kind of thing. So for the third one, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna take some time off. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna chill a little bit and try to like relax because both of my first two came after 42 weeks. So I was convinced that my third was going to come before then. Like, I'm like, there's
Mhm.
no way that all three of my babies are going to come after 42 weeks. And then I was wrong. So
Yeah. All 3. It just takes you longer to cook them.
they like it in there. I don't know. I must be super comfortable. It's not comfortable for me, but they like it.
Yeah. So, what are some of the things you did right that took you a couple times? Like, so the 3rd time sounds like you had set your practice up the best. Get more into the weeds of like what you did to really set it up for success this time. Like, so I know the length of time, but like, what else?
So there's one more thing on this last pregnancy. We actually, Dr. Jordan and I came up with a game plan of, okay, we're going to hire another associate so that we would have two in there. And we said, we want 6 months training because I knew it takes a solid 6 months to do that. So we were interviewing, we found someone that we really liked, we onboarded them and we were coming in on our days off to do all this extra training. And we were like, why are we not moving forward like we feel like we should be? And I do quarterly reviews with every single team member. And I remember we did this new doctor's quarterly review and everything was fine. I'm like, okay, we're just going to have to work a little extra hard. And then, like a week later, first thing in the morning, she walks into my office with a letter of resignation. And I was like, oh, I'm like, I'm pregnant. Like, come on. And I remember asking, I was like, at what point did you know? Because they told me they wanted to be in a sports practice. And like, I'm not that. Like, we don't, it's very obvious that we're not that. We're a full family wellness practice, lots of bellies, lots of babies. We do see athletes, but that's not what we're doing. And I was like, when did you know? And she said about a month in. And I was like, listen, I hire newer grads. I was like, going forward, I was like, if you're feeling that way, you need to be upfront with the people that you work for. I'm like, because it's not fair for anybody. And so Dr. Jordan and I were just like, we were exhausted. We had put so much energy into this person. And we actually had to sit down to be like, okay, we have 3 months. Do we hire someone and like train them up and just kind of like throw them in there? We're like, what do we do? And I remember we had someone else that we interviewed that could potentially be a good fit, but she's like, I either want family practice or I want sports. And I was like, you know what?
Trigger. Nope.
Yeah,
Nope.
we're like, we're not going to do that. So what we did was that coverage doctor that I told you about, what we decided to do instead was Dr. Jordan was going to run all the ins and outs of the practice part. And Dr. Gigi was just going to be a set of hands because she's phenomenal. She's actually in practice 39 years. Like she can adjust. And that's what we did. So we had a dedicated person that was always on the floor adjusting. And then Dr. Jordan was just in and out of exams, reports, new patients, like all of it. And, I know it's way more stressful on the team when I'm not there, but they did an amazing job. And we were never in the negative. We always were making money, maybe not to the same degree that we were when we had every single team member in there. But it was a way different, more comfortable maternity leave where I didn't have to freak out as much. So I think that piece of the story is important too. So to answer you, you're like, okay, what did you do to set it up? Well, the first thing is if you're thinking about doing this, like make sure that the doctor that you're bringing on has at least 6 months with your company. If
How do
there's
you
a
do
long,
that though? Like, so that's only doable
if you can plan it.
if you can hire an associate,
Yeah. And so,
which
or
is
like,
fine, but like, yeah, that is the
so
ideal.
you were saying before, like are there not a lot of coverage docs in your area? No.
No,
You're like in the middle of like
no,
nowhere.
no, no. My coverage doc options were very slim and they were very weird.
Okay. But you know what I would think? Like, I mean, listen, Florida is very appealing, right? I'm in
Yeah.
South Florida, like there's beaches everywhere. You can literally take a cruise for the weekend. Like it's sunny all year long. So who doesn't want to come here, right? So what I would suggest, if you're not in a position where you have an associate yet, I would do something like I did. You take a doc who has over 30 something years experience. Like my friend that was up in New York, New Jersey, I gave them a travel stipend. Like we negotiated what was going to be a good rate for like, you're going to work all these days for us. So we also factored in like some like living expense and moving stipend, even though it was a temporary thing. And I think that that's a great option because then you have like a seasoned doctor who you know can deliver a solid adjustment. And I would pay them if it's possible to come down earlier so that they shadow you and they train you.
Mhm.
Because I was thinking about before we got on this call, like
That is, yeah.
what are one of the things that's really important? And I think it's that your patients see that you're confident with this person. And part of that confidence is that they feel comfortable and competent in the workings of the practice, like in the systems, knowing the patient. So to have that time ahead of time to introduce them to everybody, to have them watch you adjust. And then like anytime we onboard a new doctor, we make a big deal about it and they shadow at first. Like they don't go hands on day one in my office because my
Right.
patients, they're used to like a solid, strong adjustment. And a lot of times, like the brand new grads, they're not at that level yet. They need more practice. So, we adjust, team gets adjusted multiple times a week and we break it down and we take videos and we do all of that before they're ready to see patients. Because I've made that mistake over the years of having multiple associates. I've made that mistake as well, where I was like, okay, they're going to be great. And like they gave me a good adjustment, but maybe they're not used to this like bigger guy or this smaller, whatever.
Mhm.
And then, once someone gets burned like that, they're not so open to trying out
No,
your
they
new
are not. They are not.
doc.
No, they are definitely not. Also, you think like I thought that the groupies, like the ones who have been around for the longest, were gonna be the most flexible and understanding. They are not.
Well, because they
No.
were there when it was just you. So like
Yeah.
you're their person and they have the hardest time. But now I've had associates with me, geez, for like 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, I'm not sure how long at this point. So I've learned from that, like, how do we intro someone new? And I know the people still to this day who, like, they're not gonna let anybody else because the way we work in our practice, we are a multi-doctor practice and we share the patient. So it's not like,
Mhm.
"Hey, you're Doctor Lindsay's
Right.
patient or you're Doctor Jenna's patient," because then no one could take a vacation or no one could
Yep.
step out to do anything. So it creates more freedom to do it this way. So they're working with all of us. And like within the first three adjustments that they start, they've at least worked with two of the docs in the practice so that they're not like, well, that's my doctor. Because like by visit three, they've only seen me. And then by visit four, they're like, what's this? Even though we try to match our adjustments as similar as possible, like
Right.
it's still just energy wise, it's a different
Yes.
person. So, one of the things is if you're not in a position where you've had this associate for a while and there's not enough time to train, and you're like, oh shit, I'm pregnant. What do I do? Right. Like, and you're ready, you didn't realize, but you're like 2 months pregnant. And so there's not necessarily enough time for that. I would find a coverage doc or I would find someone like make it attractive enough if you don't live in a place like South Florida where like, hey, there's maybe you do like a $5,000 stipend or something for coming here and they get that release to them after they complete their work. Because I've got a whole other story that I didn't share with you, which was my first maternity leave, I actually did have a coverage doc that was supposed to come on. So the one where like COVID happens and all that,
Yep.
I also had a coverage doc who had covered for us one or two times. This isn't my current coverage doc. And she was great, strong philosophy, strong adjuster, personality seems cool. And we had them, I had her lined up to come in to be that solid set of hands while I had my newer doc running everything else. And then when COVID happened, so I prepaid, which is what I usually never do. I prepaid for all this coverage. I prepaid about $6,000. Okay. And, but it shouldn't be an issue. They worked for me before a couple times, like everything went well. Only this time, because of COVID, it was a great excuse for them not to show up. They already had my money. That was fun.
Oh my
Yeah, that
god.
was really fun, and I remember being like, "Okay, so it looks like you're not gonna be able to come here, so you could go ahead and refund us that," and she was like, "Well, I'll be happy to do that once the PPP loan comes through," and if you remember, like, that was when we were all applying for, like, okay, we had people on payroll, and I was like, "Excuse me? Like, you didn't actually come in and work, so it's really interesting that you think that this money belongs to you." And she was like, "Maybe I'll ask God when," because I was like, "So when do you think the PPP will come through?" Yeah, no, it was snarky comments. It's all via text, which benefited me in the end because I was like, "Fuck that." I was actually really upset. So I called Amex, which I had paid with, and normally there's like you have like a 90-day window to dispute a charge. But because I had prepaid like months before to line this up, because I didn't want her taking work for another office. So I
Right.
guaranteed her, "Hey, you'd have this coverage." Amex was like, "You're past the deadline of disputing this." Like, we're talking about $6,000. It's like a decent amount of money.
Yeah.
It's not nothing. And I was like, "Well, this is because of COVID," because it was. Like, her
Yeah.
excuse was, and they're like, "Oh,
Oh, well, since
well."
it's then.
They were like, "Well, we have to," and, like, they were like, "Let's see what's happening." And thank God I had all that stuff documented because I disputed it, and then she refuted my dispute. I was like, "This bitch thinks that I should pay her for not working in my office, like, she has some balls." And then she also went ahead, blocked me on all social media and all this stuff, and I was like, "This girl is crazy." So and we went back and forth. I had all the documentation of my receipts and emails and texts of what she said, and Amex sided in my favor, and I did end up getting my money back. But that was another whole other wild ride.
That
So
was
I don't
smart
pre
that you paid via Amex.
yeah, because like Visa would be like F off, right?
Yeah.
But I don't usually prepay. Like, and the way I pay my coverage docs now is like we'll run it. I'll pay them
Yeah,
if it's just
how do you pay coverage docs? Like,
so
what's
they're
your
1099,
yep.
so they get the full amount. Everybody else that's on the team is a W-2 employee.
Do
So
you do hourly or do you do,
day.
s
It's
per
either you pay for
day?
a full day or a half day. So, like, if they work a 1 shift, like, a full day is 2 shifts, right? If they just work 1 shift, it costs less. If you work a full day, it's a set fee.
And
Yeah.
then do you like, is it standard that so, like, let's say a full day at my clinic is 100 people and a
Mhm.
full day at someone else's clinic is 20 people, but, like, longer appointments, like,
That's what you
is
negotiate with them,
okay.
like, I don't think that there's no set thing for coverage work, right? It depends on area. Like, I did coverage work when I first moved to Florida. I worked in 11 different practices. So I had, excuse me, 3 years experience coming as an associate down here to Florida. I used to practice in Pennsylvania at, high volume practice. We saw between 5 and 600 patient visits a week. So I
Oh,
got a lot of experience in a short amount of time. And then when I moved down here, I just would drive to different offices and be like, "Hey, I have, like, I can adjust. Do you need coverage?" And I did coverage before I independent contracted and opened my practice, and I was doing that for a while, and I was making really good money. And I didn't have all the hassle of, like, overhead and, like, staff and, like, management, and I would just show up and I'd make my schedule. And then when I opened the practice, I just went on Craigslist and some guy was like, "Hey, you can rent space out of my office." And I literally Lindsay, I met him for lunch, okay, and I was like, "This is good, I'll start Monday." No business card, no nothing, like, no business plan. That was how I opened my practice. Like, I don't recommend that, but that's how I did it, and just started meeting people and networking and did that before we moved into this space. So I've done all the things that you could do as far as practice is concerned, and I think when you do coverage, like, usually the coverage doc has a set rate of what they're expecting. I've never paid someone hourly for it. It was either like you either do a full day no matter how many people we see that day, or a half day no matter how many people we see that day.
so it was no matter how many people.
Yeah. You could see 30 or you could see 100. If you're there for the full day, we're paying you this amount.
Got it.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things so, like, with the associate, yep, 6 months but, like, with coverage docs, they can't adjust at the same frequency you can. So, like, if you're a 3 to 5-minute appointment, do you do 10 minutes? How much, like, prep do you give your patients? Like, how do you set that up?
So you interview them. And so their adjustment matched mine pretty solidly. And where it didn't, we just tweaked it, right? So I would have them shadow me and train. It's the same thing I did when I went into other offices, right? Like I wasn't going into offices to coverage that were doing ART or Groston because I didn't practice that way. Like I was full spine diversified. So I can use an arthrostim and an activator, but like I'm using my hands to adjust. So like I wouldn't bring in like an upper cervical practitioner exclusively to cover my practice because that wouldn't work, right?
Mhm.
So it's a matter of like finding a good match and like actually liking their adjustment. Like I'm a pretty heavy-handed adjuster. Like I'm not gentle and I know that. And so my patients expect that. So I needed someone that would be able to deliver, but then also be able to back off case by case, right? And then I would have them shadow me and I would show them like, here's how we start. Because in our office, like the patients start prone. So they're already laying face down when we come over and we'll start
Mhm.
with like the Deerfield leg check and then make our way up the spine. So if I have someone that's coming in and they're like, hey, starting with a seated cervical, which we're not really doing unless we're pulling that out of our pocket as a go-to one off, right? It wouldn't work. So it's really, and this is why I think the practice is successful, regardless of what doctor's there or not, is because we have systems in place for this. We even have systems in place for how we adjust. And so when we onboard a new doctor, when we onboard an intern, when we onboard a coverage doctor, they're trained that same way. Like here's our go-to. We can always make exceptions because people have exceptions that we have to deal with, right? Like a patient's in a wheelchair, they're not starting prone on the table, but being able to deliver in the same way that we did so that it doesn't matter whose hands are on them, the brand, the expectation, it stays the same because when you lose that, that's where you'll lose the patients. That's where the
Right.
practice will really go like this. And with coverage doctors, where it gets tricky is that they can come in and adjust, but if you have like an extensive like day one exam process and a really extensive like day two report of findings process, right? Like, are you using CLA insight scans and you need them to be able to explain it? Or
Right.
are you doing 4V motion study x-rays and you need them to explain that? Like most coverage docs can't walk in and just do that.
Right.
So that would be where I would say, like, if you do find out that you're newly pregnant, it would be a good idea to like put the feelers out there and look for someone to bring on that you could mentor and train where it's like because if you find out you're pregnant most people know within the first 3 months that would give you a solid 6 months of being able to train someone because the thing that sustains the practice is the adjustments but also progress exams like there has to be a check-in with the patient so you can still train someone even a coverage doc to do things that way but I think it would be harder if someone's just stepping in for coverage to do like report of findings because
Right.
that's a
You just
lot
need
to train
so
someone.
much background.
Yeah.
So your associate's name is Jordan?
Yeah. She's the
Has
best.
Jordan had a baby yet?
No.
Okay. So, like, have you put any thought into, like, as the owner, what you plan as, like, offering for maternity?
Sure.
Or
So, yeah, it's a great question. And so, like, you also run into this because my whole team is women and they're mostly younger women. Like, everyone ranges in age from like 21 to I'm the oldest. No, 21 to 45.
okay.
Okay. So, we're on the younger end. And so, at any moment, someone could be like, hey, doc, I got to talk to you, and it would never be like, oh, no. We'd just be like, okay, let's come up with the game plan. Right.
Mhm.
Because like life's going to happen. These are young, amazing women. They all pretty much want to have families. So like it's not if, it's when. So and I did have one of my CAs. I've only ever had one team member get pregnant while they were working with me. It was one of my CAs. And I delivered in April my first kid and she had her first kid in August. And it was fun to like be there for her during that. And we set up, she had so at the time, this was my oldest is 4. So we're talking about like 4 to 5 years ago when this was, right? So things revamped and changed to where we're at now, and I've learned from my other stuff. So at that time, it was you could take 6 to 8 weeks off, and because it's an hourly employee, it's not one of my doctors, right? It's one of my CAs, and I
Yeah.
said, "I'll pay you for 2 weeks of it, but I can't pay you like the whole time because
Right.
we weren't set up for that." What I do now with my doctors when they come on board after year 1, there's a lot more benefits that we offer as part of your benefits package, which is a whole other conversation we could talk about on another day. Because people I see are like, "What's the pay?" And it's not just your salary, like, "What's the benefits package?" Like, think of it like corporate America. There's more than just like, "What's the paycheck?" Like, what comes along with that? And so one of the benefits we do on all of our doctors is, short-term disability.
Yep.
And
Do
even
you
from
use
my
Aflac or do you use somebody different?
mine's through Colonial Life.
Okay.
And I've been paid for all 3 of my births and been paid very well based on my plans that I had. Even my husband, we took out a hospital plan on him. And remember, I birthed my babies in the hospital. So like when the babies were born, they fall under my husband's policy. So we got paid on that as well, which was really cool because you're not technically working, but that pays you. So that's really great to set up to have for pay for your doctors on maternity leave, right?
And then you're paying for that short-term
I
disability?
pay the policy. So,
Yep.
and the policies, they're not like set rates, right? Because it's based on income also. So like they pay you like I think it's 60% of what your usual income is. So so that's what we have set up. So if at any point our docs, when they do get
And
pregnant,
those have to be established, like, 1
and
year before the
no,
baby's born, right?
at least 10 months so that you're not taking out the policy while
Okay.
you're pregnant.
So I think
So,
Aflac might be a year. I don't know that for a
okay.
fact, but,
I'm
like
almost positive the Colonial Life policy was 10 months so that you
okay.
can't be like, "Oh, shit, I'm pregnant, let me get a policy," like, they're onto that.
Right. Naturally.
But my husband's hospital policy, um, you could take I pay that quarterly, it's like 112 bucks, so it's, like, super cheap, and my first son actually ended up in the NICU, and, like, the hospital bill was, like, $55,000, and we were paid, like, a significant amount of money. I'm talking, like, quite a few thousands, which was meant to cover the costs of the things, like, that's why it exists,
Mhm.
but I was so grateful that we had that because it wasn't an expensive policy, and in the God forbid case that something happens, like, I carry hospital policies on my whole family. I carry emergence accident policies on all of my team in every single role. So like my kid fell out of the bed. My husband went to grab him, squeeze his arm really tight so he wouldn't hit his head. We end up had a fracture, like a hairline fracture, and
Jesus.
radial radius and ulna,
Oh,
and
I bet
ended up
that
in the
was a interview with CPS at the
that was
hospital.
fun. That
Yeah.
was fun. Like we were very careful about what we said. And well, at first I didn't take him to the hospital. I was like, no, he's gonna be fine. But, like, he wasn't. So we ended up going, and I that accident policy paid me $900 for my kid's accident, and I've had a team member that on the accident policy that I carry on them, they got in a car accident, every time that they went to see a provider, even adjustments, they got paid. So these policies are actually amazing, and as a business owner, they're a great added benefit to have for your team in any capacity so that, you know, if an emergency goes down and like most of us were small businesses, it's not like we're sitting on piles and piles of cash for these emergencies.
Right.
Or maybe you have that in line for your family, but like the people that work for you, like you're responsible for them. So to be able to have these policies that will run with payroll, they don't cost a lot of money. To be able to offer that for them is huge.
Right.
It really is huge. So I'm actually in the process of revamping our handbook and what that looks like. But I really sat down and thought about like, you know, in my opinion, especially working with like families and pregnant women, like you need to be able to give people time off and to have that
Mhm.
time to bond. Like, you know, the first time I created that policy, like I never had a kid. I didn't understand. Like I knew that there was like things involved with it, but I didn't go through that process myself. And so, you know, it was like you could take 6 to 8 weeks. And working with so many moms, I ask, you know, like how long are you taking off? And, you know, some people's jobs will cover them for 6 months, which is incredible. Some people they'll get like 3 months, but there's no pay. So then they're like, okay, I can only take like X amount of time. And then like I
Mhm.
gotta figure it out, and, like, I don't love that, so I'm actually in the process of reconfiguring, like, what that leave looks like, but for me going forward, like, the minimum would be that, like, you could take at least 10 weeks off, and I'll probably do it for 12 just because, like, people need that. Now,
Yeah.
someone might choose to come back earlier, right? Like, and I'm sure with each person, it's gonna be a case by case where they're like, "Hey, maybe they need to come back part-time," or, you know, someone might have a rough end of pregnancy. Like, for me, I worked through all of mine, but, like, they might need to be on bed rest no matter how much chiropractic care they're getting,
Right,
and
right. Sometimes C-sections happen.
yeah, sometimes a C-section, they're recovering from, like, a major surgery. So, like, as a baseline, I want to be able to offer my team anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks so that they have that time of what they feel like they need. The, short-term disability allows them to make sure that they're paid during that time too,
Right.
and that they don't have to stress about, like, starting their family because that would
So
suck.
do you pay the remaining 40%?
So that's a
Or
great question. I didn't even
or you
consider
don't
that
have to yet?
because I
Yeah,
haven't
like, you
it
haven't
hasn't come up. And I think that I need to look at because what'll happen is the answer might be no on that. I don't have the answer because if someone's stepping out, we would need to bring a coverage doctor in.
Mhm.
So the answer might be no there because we're going to need to be able to carry the cost of, okay, we have this other person in the practice now that we're paying a significant amount of money to. But I have to figure that one out. I never, you know what? I never considered that piece of it that
Right.
I don't want to say yes or
And it
no.
might be different depending on how long the associate's been with you.
Right.
Like,
So
my
you have to,
associate currently has been with me for like 7 years. So,
yeah,
like I and it's so tough because I don't think that I don't think employees in general understand how much we as bosses want to give the world to them.
yeah.
Like, I would like my associate I would love for her to be able to take 3 to 6 months and have 100% pay.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make that happen with the numbers.
Well,
And
that's
so
the
that's where
thing.
it's just like, gosh, wouldn't that be an amazing gift
It
to
would
give to
be.
someone that you love and, like, loves you? And so, yeah, it's just you have to sit down and go like, "Okay, I do know we need to get a short-term life going
Well,
or
that's
short-term disability going, like, yesterday." Hopefully not literally yesterday. Hope she's not pregnant right now, but she just got married, like, 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, "Okay." No,
I
she
would
has
get
a
that policy right
uh-huh,
now.
I know, like, I'm like the ADHD in me is literally like, I've almost clicked on my, like, web search engine to, like, as you were
While we're on the
talking,
podcast.
start and just being like, "Nope, nope, nope, Lauren, you can wait 5 more minutes." Like, "Nope." Oh, and then I'm like, "Wait, maybe I should just nope, nope, nope."
Yeah, and so if they're like it doesn't matter whether it's Dr. Lindsay, Dr. Lauren, Dr. Jordan, Dr. Heather, Dr. whoever, like, you're able to provide in whatever way you can, because I think that to have successful associateships, you're already a giving person, whether you're giving not just monetarily, but, like, time, energy, like, commitments. I remember during year 1, Dr. Jordan, I was like, "You didn't take a vacation, like, don't you wanna, like, go somewhere?" You know? And I was like, you should probably like mentally like shut off for a little bit so you can come back and give more. And like my experience as an associate, it was phenomenal. I learned a ton, but it was the total opposite. It was like I wasn't encouraged to like take some time off and recharge. And listen, I was also like in my 20s, so it didn't really matter to me. I'm a workhorse. Like I was there to work and do the
Mhm.
job. So that's why I also like bringing interns on for the potential with an associateship, because I wanna see that someone, excuse me, else has such a great work ethic. Like Dr. Jordan and I work really, really well together. And we just onboarded another one of our associates. She started this last month. She's only been with us for 3 weeks, Dr. Heather, and we're super excited to have her on board. And she actually went out and opened her practice from day 1. Like I was like, "Girl, I did not feel ready to do that day 1." And she realized like I wanna learn more. Like she wants to learn the systems and having all the things set up so that she can grow. And I also learned over the years, Lauren, like I won't take anybody on for less than a 3-year commitment.
Well, you can put that in writing, but
Well, yeah,
they could just break the contract. You know how many
yes,
chiropractors I know who
but
are like,
like,
"Well, I had a 3-year contract," and
no.
then
But having the
9 months in.
expectation set ahead of time because, I feel like, people still I just went through that with my other lead. We had that agreement, but and ultimately, if it's not the right fit, you do want them out
Right.
of,
Exactly. And, like, so
but
they could be like, "I am miserable. I don't wanna be here, but sure, I'll be here for still another
no,
26 months." And it's
yeah,
like,
no thanks, because that would kill your practice. Like,
yeah.
go find what makes you happy. You wanna be in a sports practice, you wanna be in PI, you wanna do whatever, like, go do that. But I think that having the systems in place also, like we set up our leadership team. So that's me, my lead doctor, Dr. Jordan, and Anna, our office manager. And like we have our weekly team meetings happen whether I was there or not. And so when they do their team meetings, every single team member sends me an email of the recap of what went down. So I'm not physically there, but I check that every day. I get the stats emailed to me every day. So I could see like, oh shit, what's going on? Like, why are the new patients so low? Or why is the
Mhm.
conversion from a day 1 to day 2? Why is the percentage like dropping down to 40% when it used to be at 60%? Like, what's happening? And then we can train on how do we get that better? Because if you're not tracking your numbers and having those systems
So
set
you're still
up,
getting that during maternity leave?
yeah. And
Got
like
it.
my coach was like, don't check it for like 2 or 3 weeks, but I can't do that. I'm like, I'm still responsible for what's going on there. Like I checked it every fucking day.
Mhm.
And it was hard for me to also let go because at first I'd be like micromanaging, like, how did blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, like, if you're not there, like, it's you have to let them like step out on their own and do their thing and be okay with 80%, 80%, because no one else is going to give you 100 of what you give them. Being at 80%. And if you're okay with that, then that gives you the freedom to be able to step away for a bit.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. Well, any final thoughts that you did not include in this?
Final thoughts. Let me see. People place reports. I looked at and also just making sure that you're hiring people that have, I think my final thoughts are hire awesome people, like people that have your
Mhm.
same core values, people that want to work hard to help you build that, not be like, oh, it must be nice for her, but that like genuinely cared. Like they were happy and excited for me and wanted to grow the practice, like wanted to do a good job because they were a part of it. It's never like, even though my practice has my name in it, I never make it at this point about me. Like I've learned this over the years. And if you take good care of people and they know your genuine intentions, like they will provide for you in ways that, and you allow them to step up in ways that would probably surprise you,
Yeah,
and just trust the process. Like if you set your systems up, you should be good.
love it. Well, love, thank you so much. I am so are you done having babies or do you gonna have another one?
It's like, I totally like, I'm like, would I have another? And my husband's like, are you crazy? He was like, we're already outnumbered. And I'm like, but they're like, I love them as babies, but the toddlers are hard. Like,
Others are the
and like, you can't fit more than 5 people in your car. So I'm like,
right.
I would love, like, it would be so nice to have another baby, but like all the stuff that's involved in taking care of them and all that, probably not.
We'll check in like 6 months. No, 11 months apparently.
Yeah. I mean, you know me, like, all it takes is one time. So you could
Do
check
you
back in.
yeah. Are you going to any conferences coming up?
Coming up, I feel like we just went to DE. My associate, she's like, I want to go. So we went to DE. And my
I've never
next
been to that.
one, that was my first time going.
Who runs
I
that?
that is, I don't know who runs it now. I honestly, I'm not sure, but
That's
I
Dynamic Essentials
Dynamic
or
Essentials. It's really strong on the philosophy piece of chiropractic,
yep.
and I really don't go to a lot my first year because with the baby and breastfeeding, like I don't like to be away. So baby Cooper actually came with us, and it was in Clearwater, so we were able to drive there.
Yeah.
But what we'll probably get back in the mix next
Is your
year,
baby's name Cooper?
he's
I
Cooper.
thought you said baby pooper came
He's
with
the
us, and I
baby
was like,
Cooper, super
"That
pooper.
is a really funny name for your kid or, like,
I
nickname for
mean,
your
you can
kid,
call
baby
him that.
pooper."
He poops a lot. You could call him that, but I don't like to be apart for the first year. So there's
Yeah,
not a lot of stuff that me personally I'm going to right now.
yeah,
But and my babies are in a point in time where like here's why like having more than 3 kids becomes challenging. Like I can't leave. It's not fair to leave my husband with 3. So usually when we go out, the baby goes to like my parents and the babysitter will watch the other 2. So I'm in
okay.
this like different season and stage of my life where I don't really have plans.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that makes sense.
TBD.
Yeah, I mean, you are just confirming, thank you. I'm kinda glad that you said that because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, that's why I stopped at 2. That's why I stopped at 2."
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I'm
But I'll
not
come
gonna
to
lie to
your
you.
family Christmas to enjoy
Yeah,
the
well, we do
big fa
Hanukkah, so you could do Christmas
Oh my
and come light
gosh!
the
Can
menorah.
I come?
Come
Oh,
on!
hell yes. Come.
You're invited.
All right, girl. Thank you so much. I think that conversations like this are so important for leaders in this like healthcare that we're in that really just prioritizes this time. But so often everybody's just so stressed and they look back on their maternity leaves. Like, that's not what I want for my patients. That's not what I want for my employees. But yet somehow they just end up treating themselves like the worst ever. And so I hope you're a good
Just
inspiration for people to figure out their shit better.
figure your shit out and just take I'm still figuring my shit out, okay? But just take good care of people, and I wanna thank you, Lauren, so much for having me on here. I love your stuff. I just love you as a person, and whenever your stuff shows up, I laugh because 'cause you're very real, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right, She Slayers. Until next week. Bye.